Just because we're on the rocks doesn't mean we're about to have a bookish breakup. Hi everyone, it is April from Getting Hooga with It. Today I'm here to share with you everything that I read in the second half of August. I will have linked in the description box below my first August wrap up where I talk about all the books that I read in the first half of August. But here we are, ready to talk about the rest of the books I read in August. Honestly, it was a pretty good reading month. I haven't seen how many books I've read. I read 7 more books in August. I don't even know how many that is in total, but I would say that's a good reading month. We should start with the DNF. I always start with the DNF just to get it out of the way. I ended up DNFing The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street by Helen Hanff, I want to say. She is the woman who wrote 84 Charing Cross Road, which I adored. I adored that. This was its sequel, and I must say, it wasn't working for me. So 84 Charing Cross Road is a sequence of letters back and forth across the pond between a woman in New York who collects rare books and a man who owns a bookshop in London, I believe. And they begin a correspondence that is completely bookish, and then they become friends. So in The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street, she has written 84 Charing Cross Road. She's essentially going over to London to do the book tour. And it really felt, it felt like a kind of cash grab, if I'm being honest. It felt like a diary where you're following her around and seeing where she goes to different book signings and where she goes for dinner. And it was not interesting at all. And it's a very short book, and I didn't want to read it. So I DNF'd it. There just was no point to continue it. So that's okay. We're going to move into the 5-star books that I read. First, let's talk about The Lazy Genius Way. Embrace What Matters, Ditch What Doesn't, Get Stuff Done by Kendra Adachi. Now, I think she has a podcast called The Lazy Genius Podcast. And I really enjoyed this. This is a nonfiction, kind of self-helpy book, but the kind of self-help book that I can really get behind. You know, she doesn't consider all of us projects that we need to work on ourselves. She just has a list of rules that she uses for her own life that she thinks might help you and I out in our lives. Things like batching things, living in the season, and only doing things once, like deciding once. And I actually got a lot out of this. I think as a newish mom, there's a lot of pressure to do a lot of things, and Instagram can be a little bit overwhelming because it always seems like everyone's got their stuff together, and there's certain ways that you should do things and lots of shoulds. And this is like, only do stuff that really means something to you, that works for you, and everyone is different. And it seems really obvious, but I really enjoyed this book. I really loved it, and I laughed my way through it. I will tell you, there's a little bit of Christian teaching in here, but it's not in your face, and it's not preachy. So I really appreciated that, and I actually didn't mind it at all. So I really enjoyed The Lazy Genius Way, for sure. Highly recommend. The other 5-star read was I'm Still Here. Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. This is a nonfiction book written by a Black woman named Austin. She basically tells stories about her life as a Black woman and as a Black girl as well. She goes into her childhood as well and talks about Blackness in relation to white people and being surrounded by white people. She was often surrounded by white people, and how they dealt with her was not always good. Some of it might have been innocent, or maybe the intentions were good, but the effect was not always so great. One thing that I really liked about this book was she had very specific things that organizations and churches need to do. I think she works in the church, and she had specific things that would make a more diverse community in church or in organizations feel safe and feel accepted and feel wanted. And I personally think this should be required reading for anyone in HR, or anyone, in the church that's, organizing in the church, or ministers in a church. I just thought it was really, really well done. And it was also quite vulnerable at times, but always she was very, very, kind and really hopeful for change, which I appreciated as well. So I really enjoyed I'm Still Here. I listened to it on audio. I think she narrated it herself, and I really liked it. Moving on to the 4-star books that I read in the second half of August. The first is The House at Riverton by Kate Morton. This is my last Kate Morton book. I've read all of her work until she comes out with something else. So interestingly enough, this was her first book. I have to say I had to dock a star for this because you could really tell that it was her first book. It felt very different from her other books. In some ways, I really enjoyed it more. You follow a woman named Grace, and she is a servant at this big mansion. She serves the family, and her mother actually also serves the family. So one night in the summer of 1924, a young poet shoots himself. Everyone has ruled it as a suicide. It goes down in history as a suicide. But Grace was there, and the 2 daughters of the household, Emmeline and Hannah, were there, and they know what really happened. And you're kind of sorting through the mystery. Now, it takes a very long time to get to the mystery, like long. This is much more historical fiction than mystery, I would say. I really enjoyed it. Like, if you were someone who likes Downton Abbey, I think you would like this. I enjoyed, getting to know the servants, and like Grace has her own personal life. She's dealing with an ill mother. There's, the people that she works with are not always nice, and some of them are lovely. And anyway, there's drama downstairs as well as upstairs. And I really enjoyed that, but it really did feel a little bit clunky at times. You're reading from Grace's perspective the whole way through, and then there's like a third of the way through, she's like, and here's what Hannah has to say. And then you read from Hannah's perspective for a little bit, and it goes back to Grace. But the way that it was plunked in, the way Hannah's story was plunked in, felt really forced and weird and clunky, and I just wished that she'd done it a little differently. Either had little snippets of Hannah's point of view throughout, or I don't know, but it felt clunky. That said, I thought the ending was really fun. I enjoyed the ending. I didn't see it coming. So it was a good one. I always love Kate Morton most of the time. I almost always love Kate Morton. So I would definitely recommend The House at Riverton if you haven't read it yet. And then there were 2 more 4-star books, and they were part of a series. It's the March series. So I read books 2 and 3 in the March series by John Lewis. This is a graphic novel series that shows what John Lewis and the Freedom Riders had to deal with in the 60s. Now, I feel kind of dumb in some ways because I really didn't know just how dangerous it really was and how much death there was. I didn't know. I didn't know how many injuries there were. I didn't even know how many jail sentences there were just from protesting, just for asking for their rights, equal rights. That's all they were asking for. And they were met with just so much hatred. It was really wonderful. I feel like this would be a beautiful series to have in high schools, especially as a way to learn about American history. Yeah, American high schools should really have this, and this would be a great way to teach American history. I know that history can often really be slanted to white men, and needs to be adapted and needs to be more inclusive of many people's stories and many people's truths. And I think this would be a beautiful addition to history classes in America. Well, and Canada, but you know what I mean. Okay, it's time to move on to the 3-star read. I listened to Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I had recently listened to The Poet X by her. And I think I gave The Poet X 5 stars. I just loved it so much, and I cared so much for the main character of that book. In Clap When You Land, you follow two people. You follow sisters who only find out about each other essentially when their father dies in a plane crash. He is going from New York to the Dominican Republic. He has families in both places, and he's going to the Dominican Republic to visit his Dominican Republic family. And it crashes, he dies, and they find out that their father had all of these different lives, and then they find out about each other. These two sisters find out about each other. I wished that I liked this more. It wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. It was not bad. I just didn't feel myself drawn to the characters. I didn't feel invested in the characters the way that I felt so invested in the Poet X and the characters in the Poet X. I didn't have any characters that I was really, really rooting for or really, really hated in Clap When You Land, and I just wanted a little bit more. That said, I think this is a great YA book, and I would happily put this in the hands of any teenager. Okay, are you ready for the 2-star read? Because I'm not. I gave 2 stars to Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay. Paul, I love you, Paul, but what happened? I didn't like this, so let me tell you what it's about. This is essentially a zombie story, and we are following 2 women in a zombie story. One of the women is a doctor. The other woman is a pregnant woman whose husband is attacked and killed by this man who has this, it's like rabies essentially. He kills her husband and he bites her, and she's able to escape, and she needs to get to this doctor friend, and they together kind of go on this journey trying to get help for her friend who is bitten, for the one who's bitten. I found this forgettable to me. The humor that's throughout this, I really didn't like. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why a pregnant woman who is bitten and is most likely going to turn into a zombie would be able to laugh a lot. Like sometimes maybe, but a lot of laughter. And there didn't seem to be enough grief about her husband's death. And there didn't seem to be enough grief about her, not being there for her child. There are moments where she does these audio recordings for her child, but she's making jokes in there, and some of the jokes are crass, and I was like, if I knew I was never going to meet my child or what have you, I think I would have a lot of meaningful things to say. Maybe I wouldn't, but I just didn't buy it. And also, she didn't seem overly worried about her child. Like, this was at the beginning of this pandemic thing, this rabies pandemic thing, and I don't think they knew whether or not the child would come out with rabies. And there didn't seem to be any worry about the child whatsoever. And I really didn't like it. I didn't like it, and I found myself like, okay, when are we gonna get to the end? Oh, with a Paul Tremblay. Like, are we breaking up? I don't think we're breaking up. I feel like there are some Paul Tremblay books that I just adore and some that I don't. Can I call him my favorite horror author anymore? I don't think I can. Because it's just not working. It's not working the same way that it was. Oh, very sad news. We're ending on a sad note, so I need you to bring up my spirits. Tell me in the comments below, what was the best book that you read in August? I would really, really love to know. In the description box below, you can check me out on Instagram, Goodreads, Amazon, on my wish list. Patreon, if you want to hang out with me there. I hope that you had a really good August reading month, and I will talk with you soon. Bye, everyone.